Okay, so now that we are in CodeApp, I have pre-made my graphs to save us some time, and I will still explain how I did them. I took census region from our main data graph and put it on the y-axis, and on the x-axis I put the average salary. Then I added a box and whiskers graph to show you the lowest, the median, the mean, and the highest amount in salary. However, since there are 4, we're only going to be focusing on the South and the West. The question is asking, between the South and West salaries, where would you prefer to teach and why? Now that our graph is all set up, we can compare the mean for both the South and the West. The mean can also be known as the average. In our graph, the mean is pictured as the blue line, and the mean for the South is about 50,000, and the mean for the West is about 53,000. The mean for the West is higher than the South by about $3,000. After comparing the mean, we can also compare the median. The median is illustrated as the red line. The median for the South is about $48,000, and the median for the West is about $52,000. The median is also known as the middle, and the middle salary is also higher than in the West than it is the South. From this graph, we can also compare the lowest salary between both of them. The lowest salary in the South is roughly $42,000, whereas in the West, the lowest salary is about $45,000. Now that we've compared the lowest, we can also compare the highest. The highest salary in the South is roughly $73,000, compared to the West, which is about $71,000. Based off of just this data, it is consistent in telling us that the West would have better pay than it would in the South. If I were to base where I would want to work strictly off salary, I would want to work in the West. However, there is much more data that I would like to explore before choosing where I would want to work based off just salary. For me, there is more going into it than just how much I'm getting paid. I want to take into account how many students there will be per teacher in each region and how many teachers there are per region. So for this, we can get rid of this graph, and our first graph is going to focus on students per teacher per region. Once again, I have pre-made the graph, and I have put students per teacher on the y-axis and the census region on the x-axis. I have added a box and whiskers plot, and I will also add in the median just to extend the line. The line is already there in a box plot, but when I add median, it extends the line. And the second graph that I'm going to make, or that I have made, is named numbers of teachers per region, which would be this one. You can make it bigger. Once again, I have put number of teachers on the y-axis and census region on the x-axis, and then I've added a box plot, and I will add in the median just to extend the line once again. For the first part of this question, we're going to focus on students per teacher per region. With that being said, we do not need to add mean because we'll be focusing on the lowest, the median, and the highest data for this part. Question 2 is asking to explore other quantitative attributes and compare the distributions for the South and the West. Based on the data you have examined, in which region do states seem to have good teaching conditions in their schools. So to start, we will look at the graph named Students per Teacher per Region and compare only the South and West. In the South, the lowest student per teacher is 12.3, and in the West, the lowest student per teacher is roughly 12.4. With that being said, they are both very similar, and there's not that big of a difference. We can also compare the highest. The highest number in the South is 16.5, and the highest number in the West is 22.5. There is a much bigger difference when comparing the lowest and highest number of students per teacher. When looking at the median, the number of students per teacher in the South is 15.2, whereas in the West, the median is 17.9. The median in the South is lower than it is in the West. You can also see the difference in the size of the box plots that are in the South and the West. When looking at the South box plot, it is much smaller and the data is more and the data is more compressed together, whereas in the West it's more spread out, meaning that the box plot is going to be looking a little bigger. For our second graph, to continue looking at quantitative attributes, we're focusing on the number of teachers there are per region. Once again, we have already made this graph, putting number of teachers on the y-axis and census region on the x-axis, adding in the box plots, and extending the median line. We will only want to focus on the numbers in the South and the West because that is the main focus of our questions. In the South, the lowest number is around 6,200 or 6,200, and in the West, the lowest is around 7,400. Knowing that we know the lowest, we can now look at the highest between the South and the West. The South is around 334,000, and the West is around 292,000. There is a small difference in the lowest numbers when comparing the South and the West. However, it is not as big as it is when we compared the highest numbers. The South has a bigger variety of numbers, whereas the West has more of a cluster of numbers. When looking specifically at the West, you can see that there is more of a cluster towards the bottom by the x-axis. X-axis. And there's an outlier at the top. We can now look at the median of both the South and the West. The median is the middle amount that is represented in the box plot. The median in the South is about 46,000. And the median in the West is about 26,000. Based off of that data, the median number in the South is much higher than in the West. This means that there will be more teaching positions and more teachers in the South than there would be in the West. After looking at these quantitative attributes, I would prefer to teach in the South. The teaching conditions are better in the South than they are in the West. In the South, there would be a lot more teaching positions available and a lower student-to-teacher ratio, which I would prefer. Overall, I would rather work in the South rather than in the West. I understand that teaching in the West would be better for a salary income. However, I would rather work in the South because of the workplace conditions and the student-to-teacher ratio.